But let's move on to the Colin Kaepernick story. Mike Carlson is with us this morning because there were significant developments late Friday night. It's called the stereotypical PR dump, Mike, where you issue something on a Friday and you hope something good is going to happen over the weekend and everybody will forget about this.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And funnily enough, I listened to the paper review yesterday when you guys put it up later on, and made a little note of what Declan was saying about the PGA, just in reference to that. We can get back to that in a minute, but. Yeah, they announced a settlement in the Kaepernick case, which, remember, is not a law case, but it was a case brought within the terms of the collective bargaining agreement between the NFL and the Players Association. So it's an internal matter in that sense. No terms were discussed, and neither side is allowed to discuss or reveal what those terms were. But it was immediately being presented in America as a quote-unquote draw between the league and Kaepernick, and then there was a kind of drip of little things about Kaepernick. A lot of he was betraying his cause, and the cause, of course, was Black Lives Matter and protesting against police brutality, especially as aimed at black people. And there was also a report, which then proved to be false, that he had turned down a $20 million offer from the Alliance of American Football, which is a new spring league, a kind of minor league sort of setup, much like NFL Europe used to be, but taking place in the States and thus far, 2 weeks in, remarkably successful for what it's doing. So a league with a kind of total of $1 million had offered him 20 apparently, and he turned it down. But that turns out not to be true, according to people with the AAF. So I think the spin was to try to make this as everything is hunky dory. But the reality is that it's a victory for Colin Kaepernick, and it's not an issue of protest, but process. In other words, it's not vindicating his protests. The league hasn't said you were right to do that. The league hasn't said he'll come back into football. But what it has done is, in effect, conceded that they had blackballed him and that they wanted to stop the process before it got any further into investigating the terms of that and what had gone on with the league owners.
There was an important ruling last August where, you get to a point where you put some of your evidence forward and it's decided whether or not this case will progress. And at that point, it was decided that there was enough evidence for the case to progress. And after that, a load of discovery happened. So some very senior figures within the NFL, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, John Elway, Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, they had all of their texts and emails in connection with this issue. They were discoverable. So at that point, a treasure trove of information is how I saw it described. And some of it very private and some of it potentially embarrassing falls into the hands of the lawyers of Kaepernick and Eric Reid. And, that would have been pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. That August decision made a settlement probably inevitable. And the NFL had moved to dismiss it right then because, according to the CBA, collusion has to be proven. In other words, you need hard evidence to do that. And ever since baseball in the late 80s got caught colluding, Peter Uberoff, who was the commissioner, had lectured the owners about being stupid in the amount of money they paid. And the hard evidence was there. The NFL was banking on the fact that there was no hard evidence of a collusion. Nobody ever sat down and said, okay, Kaepernick's not playing for us. But in August, his lawyers, Kaepernick's lawyers, presented Stephen Burbank with enough evidence to suggest that was the case. And some of that did come from depositions. But as you say, it opened the door for a lot more. And the NFL does not like its internal workings to become public. And that's everything from what owners say to to what the budgets are and where the money goes and that kind of thing. And the October meeting in October 17 that you were mentioning, Jerry Jones literally went into that meeting with a message from Donald Trump saying, I'm going to kill you guys. This is an issue where you need to be on my side. And the obvious inference from that was that the owners believed that. 7 or 8 owners were major contributors to Trump. Like with the PGA, the kind of natural bias is in that direction. Golf is a country club sport still. It's played by more or less the elites. You've had a couple of exceptions of black golfers who come up through public courses and things like that. But basically, it's an elite sport, and its natural inclination is to lean toward the rich and powerful. And the same is true of NFL owners.
Yeah. I do wonder if that's actually something they want to clean up, Mike. I mean, that idea, are NFL owners pretty comfortable with that view? Like, it seems to me like the likes of Jerry Jones is fairly okay with that, but then again, he's not the only NFL owner at play here. Like, we saw a story last week that Adam Silver was linked with potentially being the successor to Roger Goodell, which, if you're talking about a PR coup, that would be an absolute jackpot from an NFL point of view. Suddenly they've got a guy who can be held up as the beacon of the left here.
Yeah, I think you have to put the left in inverted commas.
Exactly. Well, that's true.
In that, but yeah, and the NBA is where the NFL is sort of 60% black. The NBA is 80 or 85% black players, and they've been far more proactive in terms of engaging with those kind of issues. And it's also a league where the NFL has 53 players on a team, 10 players on a practice squad. The NBA has, now 15, but it used to be 12. But the stars in the NBA could go out. You could take the top 50 players and they could go start their own league with 5 or 60 players, with 6 teams and 10 players, and just hire arenas and sell them out because all the best players would be playing there. And I think the owners are aware of that possibility. Silver's done a really good job on the PR sense, and in a sense, that's the commissioner of the sport is, especially in the NFL, is works for the owners, not for the sport, and that's almost and Silver's done a great job of making it appear, and in fact, in a lot of ways, working for the sport, not specifically for the owners, which in the big picture is probably a better thing, because in the big picture, if the sport continues to grow and attract fans and treat the players well, it's going to be better for everybody in the end.
Yeah, there's no way he's getting the NFL job though, because those owners just won't have him. He likes the players too much.
Well, that's the thing. It does seem to be like a bit of a facade, and I think you've touched on it there, Mike. The whole Adam Silver aura, it's a great PR coup if that would happen. But in terms of Adam Silver as a man, I don't want to say he's like Roger Goodell too much, but I'm sure they share similar trains of thought.
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the thing is, from a PR point of view, ditching Goodell for Silver would be a kind of a terrible move from the NFL's point of view. We would say they've been doing lots wrong, and Goodell has presided over the making of a lot of money for the NFL. They have and one of the other things to remember when you're talking collusion, of course, is that the exemption to antitrust legislation that these leagues enjoy is based on the idea that although it is one business, the league, the teams are actually competing against each other, so that antitrust would limit their ability to compete against each other. If you're colluding, the case that the teams are actually competing against each other becomes a lot harder to make. And in the case of baseball, back in the 80s in Uberoff, he told the owners specifically, there's money to be made there if you stop spending so much money on players. Why are you doing this? And in baseball, because of the luxury tax and the way money's redistributed, there is no pressure on you to win in order to make money. And the same is true in the NFL. They don't make a big deal about it, and everybody does try to win, but teams make money whether they win or lose.
Yeah. I hadn't realised that there was 280 million was the figure I saw for that collusion campaign or collusion case for baseball. I knew nothing about it at all, and I also didn't realise that this was just an entirely internal thing. So that's obviously why the players put this in the collective bargaining agreement, because it has happened before in American sport that collusion happens against the players.
Absolutely. And when I worked for Major League Baseball from 90 to 94, and the commissioner was Fay Vincent, who the owners got rid of because he was a little bit too independent for their taste. But one of the things Vincent said when he first came in was that the owners had to make nice with the players, because the owners had literally stolen $300 some odd million from them by not negotiating contracts fairly, and by withdrawing from the free agency process, and that was very much true. And you're too young to remember it, basically, which is good for you guys. But it did set a stage, and it did remind people, I think, at the time, and people forget it very quickly, of what the business of baseball and what the business of sport in America is to make money. It's not to just present fans with an opportunity to see teams or sportsmen with an opportunity to play. It's to make money. And the baseball strike of '94 was literally the result of that, because the antipathy of the players to the owners at that point was such that a strike was almost inevitable, when they couldn't negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, there was one other aspect to this. So the other 49ers player who kneeled at the time was Reid, who was also blackballed and didn't get a contract at the start of last season. But then eventually the Carolina Panthers suffer enough injuries and have a progressive enough new owner who's like, yeah, of course we'll take this guy, put him on a contract for 6 months. He's now signed a $22 million 3-year deal, and he's getting his the top 10, I think it's the 11th highest paid safety in the NFL he's going to be next season. So fair play to him. He's getting a contract close enough commensurate with his talents. But it was interesting that contract was signed 2 weeks ago. So it seemed almost as if he's also part of this collusion case. So it seemed almost as if the owners knew this was coming and they were ready to sign Reid. Does it mean now that the owners will be also ready to sign Colin Kaepernick, because he can clearly do a job to make a team better?
Yeah, well, we've been saying that for 2 years. It's been obvious that he's better than a lot of people who are in the league and been signed. It's an interesting dilemma. Reid, the Panthers needed Reid when they signed him. They'd had injuries and they had to fill that spot. It wouldn't have happened under Jerry Richardson, the previous owner. I'm convinced of that. And funnily enough, Kaepernick's agent put out a little floater over the weekend that the two teams he thought were most likely to sign him were either the Patriots or the Panthers. I can't see the Patriots signing him because although it makes a certain amount of sense in that Brady is going to be 42 and whatever, but Cam Newton's coming off a shoulder injury, an operation in the offseason. Kaepernick is a relatively similar player to Cam Newton in terms of his skill set. And it would make sense for the Panthers to sign him as at least a temporary replacement and possibly a long-term replacement if the surgery doesn't work out. And the Patriots are an interesting case too, because Kraft is a relatively liberal, quote unquote, owner. In terms of causes that he's supported, and he's a Democratic Party back, but he's also a friend of Trump's, and he was a donor to Trump as well, and on a kind of personal basis, which was true of Tom Brady as well. They knew Trump personally, they'd been golfing with him, that kind of stuff, and that kind of loyalty trumped, so to speak, or at least Kraft's natural political inclination. I don't know what Brady's natural political inclination is, although we seem to know what Giselle's was, so that's probably more important.
Yeah,
she doesn't get to vote though in the elections, I don't think.
I could see Bill Belichick deciding that he has enough reason to sign somebody like Kaepernick, and that they have a package of plays for him over an 18-month period that will help to prolong Brady, that not that Brady's coming out, but that maybe Brady's coming out on second down sometimes or third down. I can't see Brady agreeing to that, but you can just see somebody like Belichick going, yeah, I can do this because I want to. And I'm in a situation where
although I think Bill is probably more conservative than Kraft or Brady by nature. And he grew up at a military, his father was coaching at the Naval Academy. My impression of Bill politically is that he's pretty far on the right. So I'm not sure he would want to do that. And I'm not sure Brady, who plays virtually every snap, even in games where they're well ahead, and you would think resting a 41-year-old might be a good idea to avoid injury or whatever. It's an intriguing idea. You think of when at the end of the Super Bowl when they went to that 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, and then spread them all out, and Brady was alone in the pocket. Imagine if that were Kaepernick alone in the pocket. All of a sudden, you have to be aware of the fact that he might take off and run, and it's going to slow your pass rush down even more than it does in reality. So, it's a very intriguing idea, but it's one that I just can't see happening.
Well, then the last thing is obviously the Ravens, who have finally given up in the Joe Flacco experiment, who do have a quarterback who will run the ball and who will run the ball as well as Colin Kaepernick, maybe a bit better than Colin Kaepernick, who knows? But it would make a lot of sense now to stick him in there, unless you fear that you're going to freak out your second-year player by having this veteran on the sideline who could replace him at any point.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. They have Robert Griffin, RG3, backing him up right now, who's another similar quarterback in the sense, or at least he was before he hurt his knee in running ability. But the other place I think would be a good place for him to land would be right down the road in Washington, because Washington with Josh Jackson ran an offense which was very similar to what Kaepernick ran in San Francisco, and he could do that better than Josh Jackson. And that was when they signed Josh Jackson and he started to play, everybody said the same thing. Oh, we can't sign Kaepernick for X or Y reasons. You've just signed a guy who's exactly like Kaepernick, only not as good. Yeah. And not as experienced. And so Washington and Carolina would both, to me, make a lot of sense as places for him to land. And and John Elway, who would never sign him, but I mean, given what Elway's doing with quarterbacks, it would make a lot of sense to put him in Denver and give him a shot there. And if Gary Kubiak were still involved in the offense, he'd be a great fit for that too. Yeah, no, for sure. Mike, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Oh, anytime, guys. Thank you. It's Mike Carlson with some thoughts on the Colin Kaepernick situation, which appears to be drawing to a close, and hopefully we'll see him back in the NFL sooner rather than later, because he's unbelievably exciting when he's playing well. Yeah, it's interesting that he says there's the settlement. The draw is basically a concession of blackballing. Are NFL owners the type of people who would get more empowered by that, or actually feel liberated to go and sign Colin Kaepernick because of that? Now it's done. Now it's like, so they agreed to collude, and then they're like, oh, we never did that. Now that he can actually help the team, I think that there will be a market for services. Yeah, maybe I'm just being extremely cynical that after the fact they might be so stubborn to the fact that there was no collusion going on. We definitely just didn't sign him because of his lack of ability, and we're still not going to sign him. That's what I mean. Yeah, except they signed Eric Reid when they needed him. That was he was like lower profile because obviously he wasn't the quarterback, but his teammates right there beside him protesting every step of the way. But like the Eric Reid thing, if Eric Reid is signed and Colin Kaepernick isn't, that just strengthens their position in the fact that Colin Kaepernick just is not good enough to play in the NFL. Yeah, except then you look at all the crap quarterbacks who can. Also, NFL owners want to win. Yeah, all right, that's pretty much all we got time for this morning on OTB AM.